Hello, physics friends. Today I want to share with you a new program that I found online called the Falstad Circuit Simulator, which I have found invaluable in my class this year in order to help my students in my electronics course understand how circuits work and how to use this online simulator to make sense of actually building circuits in the classroom. So this is new to me, and I've learned it this year along with my students. But what I'm going to show you is a brief overview of how you can work inside of here and give you a few tips and tricks that I picked up with a little bit of input from my students along the way. So when you open Falstad, this is the screen that it brings up immediately, which is overwhelming, and there's a lot going on. But in order for us to start with a simple circuit, I'm going to click the Circuits button and go down to Blank Circuit, which gives me a nice black screen. Now in here, I'm going to draw all the wires and components and connections in the same way that I would construct something in class. So recently, I started talking with my students about capacitors, how they store charge and how that works. Now that's all well and good in class, but it's hard to actually see things storing charge because you can't see that in person. You need to see that charge being implemented on some element of your circuit in some way. So in order to do this, I'm going to start by drawing. And if I go to draw in here, it's going to give me a whole bunch of different things that I can pick up along the way. So my students have pointed out to me that these little letters that are pointed right next to it, these can really help you to find things quickly and to draw them. So if I remember, for example, here I'm going to be working with capacitors, that little c is a capacitor. I can just tap C on my computer, or on my keyboard rather, and then click and drag to draw it. I'm going to do that same thing here, but with an import of a voltage source. So this is the same as just having a battery. I clicked that, and then I can click and drag on here, and that creates a voltage source. In class, what we use are 9-volt batteries, so I'm going to click this, double-click it rather, and change my voltage to 9, and now that's good to go. I can right-click this thing and have some options here to how I can have different settings for this and scopes to see how voltage it changes over time, but that's a little bit complicated for now. So the circuit that we were looking at in class had them connect this voltage source to a capacitor, which charged up, and then after it was done charging up, we flipped a switch, and that threw it through an LED, a light-emitting diode. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to show that by drawing a capacitor. I could go to draw and find capacitor, or as I just reminded you, I can type C onto my laptop, onto my keyboard, and then just click and drag. And there we go. We've got a capacitor. If I hit escape, that allows me to select things, move them around, and I can put things right where I want them. I'm now going to press R to add in a resistor, and that's going to do the same thing. What I want to do now is I want to add in an LED into my circuit. So I'm going to go up to draw. I'm going to look at passive components. An output and label, and I'm going to click LED. This is already checked because I just tapped L on my keyboard. I'm a little bit used to this by now, but I can click that and draw that in this direction right here. Note that before I release, it looks like the traditional symbol for an LED, but then when I release it, it turns into a circle. If I hover over it, it shows me that regular LED. Now what I want to do is add in the switch component. So the switch that I used in my class was a single pole double throw switch. So I can look in here to find different kinds of switches. If I go into passive components, I can find that right here, single pole double throw, SPDT. I can click from the starting point of one of my components and drag, and that'll create that switch here. Then finally, I can connect all these things with wires. So I can go to draw and hit wire. I know the shortcut for that is W, and I can connect all these pieces to each other like this. And as soon as I finally connect my wire to my voltage source and complete this loop, I will begin to see current flowing in my system. So that's represented by little yellow dots that are flowing in the direction of current. I can hit reset up here to watch that start all over again because it kind of moves a little bit fast. Or I can change my simulation speed so that I can watch things moving at a little bit slower pace, which is a little easier to follow along with. What's happening right now is that even though students can't see this in class, they can see this thing charging up, which is really nice. Then when I go ahead and click my switch to flip it, I can see the current going the opposite direction out of the capacitor through the LED and lighting it up. So if they see this work in class, now they get a sense of where that charge is actually being stored and how it's moving in my circuit, which is very handy. Students have pointed out that one thing that's a little confusing on here is that when I draw wires across things, it looks like these two wires should intersect with each other, but they do not. So they need to be very attentive to the fact that all wires must touch each other at these little dots that represent nodes. But overall, I have found this resource to be very successful in class. Students will often construct something and it seems like it should work, but it doesn't. So they run on here to make sure that it should work in theory. And I've been finding that very helpful to help guide my discussion of how different components work. So I highly recommend getting in here, goofing around with it, and seeing if it works for you.